cabin in the woods, Emily and Jake had been together for 5 years, and this Valentine's Day was supposed to be special. To escape the chaos of city life, they rented a secluded cabin deep in the woods, a charming, old-fashioned retreat with a cozy fireplace, rustic furniture, and a breathtaking view of the snow-covered forest. It was the perfect romantic getaway. As they pulled up to the cabin, the sun dipped behind the trees, casting eerie shadows across the frozen ground. The Airbnb host, an elderly woman named Mrs. Holloway, had left a note on the door. "Welcome, lovebirds. Enjoy your stay and remember, never open the basement door." Emily chuckled. "Classic horror movie warning." Jake smirked. "Well, we're not in a horror movie, babe. Just a peaceful, romantic getaway." But as they stepped inside, an unsettling feeling settled over Emily. Something about the cabin felt off. The whispering walls that evening, they sat by the fire, sipping wine and reminiscing about their relationship. The warmth of the flames and the soft crackling of the wood set a perfect mood until Emily heard something. A whisper, faint, distant, almost as if the walls were speaking. "Jake, did you hear that?" "Hear what?" He looked up from his phone, slightly tipsy from the wine. Emily shook her head. "Never mind. Must be the wind." But as she turned her gaze back to the fire, the whisper came again. This time, clearer. "She's not yours." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers tightened around her wine glass. She glanced at Jake, who was scrolling through his phone, completely unaware. "Did you say something?" she asked. "Nope. Just checking some messages." Emily forced a smile, but unease prickled at her skin. The basement door later that night, as they prepared for bed, Jake suddenly stopped in the hallway, staring at something. It was the basement door. "Babe, did you lock this?" he asked. Emily frowned. "No." "Why?" Jake twisted the doorknob. It was locked from the outside. The old wood looked scratched, as if someone or something had tried to claw their way out. "Maybe Mrs. Holloway keeps storage down there," Emily suggested, though her voice wavered. Jake shrugged, but something about the door unnerved him. The scratches looked fresh. Love letters from the dead that night. Emily woke to the feeling of cold fingers brushing against her cheek. Her eyes snapped open, but Jake was sound asleep beside her. Her heart pounded. She turned on the bedside lamp, scanning the room. Nothing. Shaking her head, she reached for the glass of water on the nightstand and froze. A small, aged envelope sat next to it. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but the words were chilling. "Be mine forever." Emily's hands trembled as she opened the letter. Inside was a short message, written in elegant cursive. "You took him from me. Now I take him from you." She gasped, dropping the letter as a cold whisper slithered into her ear. "He's mine now." The shadow in the mirror the next morning, Emily tried to convince herself it had been a nightmare, but when she went to the bathroom, her blood ran cold. The mirror was fogged over despite the room being ice cold. And there, written in the condensation, were the same words. "Be mine forever." Suddenly, Jake called from the other room. Come here." She ran to the bedroom where Jake stood by the window looking pale. He pointed outside. Footprints in the snow, leading from the basement door to their window. But there were no prints leading away. A bloody Valentine that night, the whispers turned into voices. The voices turned into screams. Emily saw her reflection move on its own. Jake's eyes turned hollow, his voice distant. Then at 2:00, the basement door creaked open on its own. Something was coming. Something that had waited far too long. And it was finally Valentine's Day. The haunting of love, Jake jolted awake as Emily shook him violently. "Jake, wake up," she whispered, her voice shaking. "There's someone inside the house." They listened. Heavy breathing echoed through the hallway. Slow, deliberate footsteps crept closer. Jake grabbed the fireplace poker and held Emily close as they tiptoed toward the bedroom door. The footsteps stopped. The breathing ceased. Then a voice, low and menacing, whispered right outside the door. "He was mine first." Emily let out a strangled gasp as the bedroom door handle turned. Jake swung the poker with all his strength, but the door flung open on its own. A shadowy figure stood in the doorway, its hollow eyes fixed on Jake. Then it lunged. Chapter 8. Till death do us part, Emily screamed as Jake was yanked from her arms, disappearing into the darkness. The figure's clawed hands wrapped around his throat as he gasped for air. Emily scrambled for her phone, her trembling fingers dialing 911. But as the call connected, a cold breath whispered into her ear. "No one can save you now." She spun around, but the room was empty. Jake let out a choking gasp. Run. But Emily wasn't leaving without him. She grabbed a candlestick and swung it at the figure, but it vanished, leaving only an icy chill. Jake collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. Emily knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. "We're getting out of here." They stumbled toward the front door, only to find it locked. From the inside, behind them, the whispers rose into a deafening chorus. "Be mine forever." The last thing Emily saw was the shadow reaching for her as darkness consumed them both. Epilogue. A lover's curse. Days later, Mrs. Holloway returned to the cabin to check on her guests. She knocked, but there was no answer. Pushing the door open, she gasped. The cabin was empty except for a single envelope on the nightstand. She picked it up, her hands trembling as she read the words, "They are mine now."